Welcome to Kart Class, brought to you by 18 times Australian champion David Serra. Kart Class strives to give kart racing drivers the fundamental driving skills, kart setup, and the mindset required to take you from beginner to winner. Your host David Serra has over 25 years experience in kart racing and is the most successful driver in Australian history.
G'day guys, and welcome back to an episode of our Kart Class podcast. I'm your host, 18-time Australian champion David Serra, and today's discussion is going to be all about kart setup sheets. So it's something that you want to look to just create yourself. You can find them online, but what they are is they're great for filling in notes at the kart racetrack, because the problem is from time to time we make adjustments on the fly and we forget to write them down. We go for our next couple of races and we think, far out, what do we actually change before we went faster or slower? And with so many things that can happen at a track, you've got 4 or 5 different races in a day, you've got some practice sessions, you might be changing engines, sprockets, tyre pressures, all these little things. It can be hard to keep track of what you've actually changed, what worked and what didn't work. What we recommend getting a kart setup sheet created is it also helps you on the fly. Like you could go from going to a track and then 3 months later, you race at the same track. So you can go back to those notes and go, you know what, last time we were there a few months ago, we had this sort of sprocket on and we had this tyre pressure and this base setup. And it's really good to reflect back on so you've got a good starting point so you don't get too lost. Now, some of the things that we'd recommend you popping into your setup sheet when you're creating it is you want to try and have the date so that you know that at certain times of the year it's going to be certain weather. So then adding in the temperature of the day. I would put in the time of the session, so you know whether you've had a morning session, a midday session or an afternoon session, because some tracks really are determined performance-wise in regards to the time of the day. So if you've got a really hot climate, the tracks are normally tend to be faster in the mornings before the heat hits the track surface and the rubber, and that then starts to equate to slower lap times and the kart's getting more slippery. So once you've got the date and the time, try and put in the general weather. So whether that's overcast, it's sunny, it could be raining, I'd try and add that in as well. Then you want to try and add 4 boxes and you want to try and replicate those as your 4 tyres. So you've got your 2 front tyres and your 2 rear tyres, and just marking them like LF for left front, RF for right front, left rear, so LR, and right rear, so double R. And you can start to put 2 of those boxes down. The first box is going to be how you start your pressures. So again, for an example, you might put them all at 12. So you just write 12 in each of those 4 boxes. And then you want to write next to it with the 4 additional boxes is the pressure when you come off the track. So you can see how much those tyres have increased throughout the session. So again, you might find that the 2 rears are at 16 psi and the 2 fronts are at 15 psi. And then you can start to document whether you need to increase the fronts or lower the rears to give yourself the best possible balance for your 4 tyres. Now, the other things that you want to try and add in is also the gear ratio that you're using. So you leave a little box for your front sprocket ratio and also your rear sprocket. And that can be, I would try and put next to your sprocket also the RPM of the engine. So those revs. And try and create a little box for your low RPM. So you can see on the tightest corner of the track what the lowest RPM is going to be compared to the highest RPM on the main straight. And then as you start to adjust your sprockets, you can start to see the difference in black and white from your notes. Now, if you can find a little picture of a go-kart and it's like an overhead bird's eye view of the kart, try and have something that you can write down your camber and caster. So whether you're running positive camber, you're running neutral, so you're just running 0, or you're running negative camber. That's something that you can always look back on from time to time. You want to try and add in your front spaces on the front end. So whether you're running, sort of 5, 10, 15, even up to 20 mil of spaces on the front, you've got somewhere to fill in that gap. With the rear of the kart, you want to try and write down what axle you're using. So if you're a driver who tends to change axles quite frequently, you want to leave something where you can put in whether you're running a soft, a medium, a hard, extra hard axle. It could be a shortened axle, so you're changing the length of the axle, and also the hub length size. So we know that some of our hubs come in different sizes. You might have a 60mm hub, you might have a 75, you might have a 90mm hub, even a 120mm hub sometimes for the wet weather conditions. So having that hub length size is quite good also. If you can find a seat that you can pop onto your notes, you can put down the measurements. So just finding 3 different measurements on your seat, and that can be from the lip of the seat to the top of the axle. It could be that the height of the seat off the ground and it might also be that the kingpin to the front lip of the seat. So you can write those down just in case you want to change seat positions from session to session or from race meeting to race meeting. They're sort of good things to write down. Now, I tend to try and put a track map on my setup sheet, so I can just leave a box that I can input a different track map just to change it up in between race events. So all I've got to do is I'm just going to change the picture, and then I'll go to a new track, and I can start to write notes down of the actual track itself. So that can help you out if you're having difficulties thinking about remembering which corners on the racetrack you're having difficulties with. You can look back at your track map and the notes, and you can write in that stuff as well. So they're the things that I try and have on my setup sheet. They're always good to look back on if you're having dramas or you forget what axle or what sprocket you're running. You can look back at your notes. If you enjoyed today's episode on our kart setup sheet, feel free to leave us a comment below. And if you have any other questions, shoot us through to info@kartclass.com and follow us on our social media channels at kartclass over at Instagram and TikTok. We provide all your driving techniques and needs. I'm your host, 18-time Australian champion David Serra. Thanks so much for tuning in. Cheers.
If you've enjoyed today's episode and want to learn more about your kart racing, be sure to check out kartclass.com.au for driving courses catered to all skill levels.